The first thing I noticed was the laughter. Not the kind of warm, familiar laughter you'd expect to hear in your own home, but something low and conspiratorial. I had been out of town for 3 days on a work trip. The kind of trip that leaves you tired but satisfied, knowing you're doing what's best for your family. As I walked through the front door, my suitcase still in hand, that sound stopped me cold. It was Amanda's voice. I'd know it anywhere, but it wasn't her usual tone. It was playful, teasing, almost intimate. And then came Ethan's voice. I couldn't make out what he was saying, but I caught enough to know they weren't talking about school or video games. They didn't hear me come in. The living room was just around the corner, and something made me stop short, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't eavesdropping, not at first. I just froze, confused by the tone of their conversation. And then Amanda said something that turned my confusion into a burning knot in my stomach. "You don't have to feel guilty about it," she whispered. "He has no idea, and he never will. He's too clueless to figure it out." I leaned back against the wall, trying to steady myself. "Clueless? About what?" Ethan replied, his voice quieter, almost nervous. "But what if he finds out? I mean, I don't want to hurt him." "Hurt me? Why the hell would anything they're talking about hurt me?" Amanda laughed again, sharp and cold. "Don't be dramatic. He's blind to everything that isn't right in front of his face. That's what makes this so easy." I stepped into the room before I even realized what I was doing. Both of them jumped, Amanda clutching her phone like she'd been caught committing a crime. Ethan's eyes went wide, guilt painted across his face like a neon sign. "What's easy?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. For a split second, Amanda looked panicked. Then, just as quickly, she plastered on that infuriatingly confident smile I'd seen her use to charm her way out of parking tickets and awkward family dinners. "Oh, hey, babe," she said, as if nothing in the world was wrong. "You're back early." "Early enough," I said. My eyes darted to Ethan, who suddenly wouldn't look at me. "What's going on?" Amanda shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Nothing. Just chatting with Ethan." It wasn't nothing. I could feel it in the way the air in the room seemed to thicken, like the walls themselves were holding a secret I wasn't allowed to know. Ethan muttered something about needing to finish his homework and bolted upstairs, leaving me alone with Amanda. I turned to her, my voice sharp now. "What aren't you telling me?" Amanda's expression hardened, the mask slipping just a little. "What the hell are you talking about?" she snapped. I wasn't backing down. "I heard you. You said I'm clueless, that I'll never figure it out." "Figure what out?" Amanda, for a moment, she just stared at me, like she was deciding whether to double down or walk away. Then, she sighed and rolled her eyes. "You're being ridiculous. You're tired from your trip. Maybe you misheard something." The dismissal was like gasoline on a fire. "I didn't mishear anything. So why don't you stop playing games and tell me the truth?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping into that patronizing tone I hated. "The truth is, you're paranoid. You come home from work trips looking for something to be mad about, and it's exhausting. Maybe if you actually paid attention to your family instead of your job, you'd stop imagining problems where there aren't any." I opened my mouth to argue, but she was already walking away, phone in hand, like the conversation was over. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Something was wrong. Amanda knew it, Ethan knew it, and now I was damn sure of it too. And whatever they were hiding from me, I was going to find out. After Amanda brushed me off and disappeared into the bedroom, I stood frozen in the living room. My thoughts were racing, but one thing was crystal clear. She was lying. Ethan was lying. I just didn't know what about yet. I needed answers, and I needed them now. That's when I remembered the new security cameras. Amanda had insisted we install them last week. Said it was for Ethan's safety, especially with me traveling so much. The idea had sounded reasonable enough, and I didn't question it. But now I wondered if her push to have them set up had another purpose. Was she trying to cover her tracks? Or had she gotten careless and forgotten they existed? I pulled out my phone, opened the app linked to the cameras, and started scrolling through the footage. The cameras weren't everywhere, just the main areas of the house. The hallway near the bedrooms, the living room, the kitchen, and the backyard. I clicked into the most recent files, skipping through hours of mundane activity. Ethan on his tablet, Amanda cooking, the dog barking at a squirrel. Normal stuff. Then, around 7:30 p.m. 2 nights ago, the atmosphere shifted. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table, working on something that looked like homework. Amanda leaned over his shoulder, but she wasn't helping him. She was whispering, her face close to his ear. Ethan nodded, looking uncomfortable, then shook his head sharply. I turned up the volume, straining to hear. Amanda's voice was low but clear enough to send chills down my spine. "Listen to me, Ethan," she said firmly. "You have to keep this between us. Do you understand? If he finds out—" She paused, glancing over her shoulder, even though no one else was there. "If he finds out, it'll ruin everything. Do you want that?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He looked scared, like he was being forced to hold onto a secret too big for him. Finally, he mumbled, "No, but I don't think I can keep lying to him." "You can and you will," Amanda snapped, her tone colder now. "It's not lying. It's protecting him. You don't want to hurt your dad, do you?" That, the word stabbed through me like a knife. Whatever this was about, it had to do with me. Ethan swallowed hard, then nodded. "Okay." Amanda's face softened, but it didn't make her look kinder. If anything, it made her look more dangerous. She cupped his face in her hands and said, "Good, because you're smart enough to know that telling him the truth would destroy everything we've built. And your real dad wouldn't want that." I stopped the video. "Your real dad." The words echoed in my head like a bomb going off. Ethan wasn't my son. I replayed the footage, thinking I'd misunderstood. But no, there it was again. Amanda's voice, clear as day, referring to Ethan's real dad. My stomach churned as the implications hit me. Ethan, my boy, my pride and joy, wasn't mine. But who the hell was his father? I thought back to Amanda's cryptic comment from earlier. Someone who knows how to take care of things. Someone in the family. The possibilities were horrifying, but one stood out immediately. My brother, Ryan. Ryan and I had never been close. He was the charming one, the golden boy who could do no wrong. Everyone loved Ryan, including Amanda. Back when we first started dating, I'd noticed how she'd light up around him, but I'd dismissed it. Amanda was outgoing, friendly. That's just who she was, or so I thought. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the pieces were clicking together in a way that made my skin crawl. The way Ryan always treated Ethan like his own kid. The way Amanda had always defended him, even when he was blatantly in the wrong. I needed proof. Scrolling back further in the footage, I found another clip from the same night, this time in the living room. Amanda was on the couch, her phone pressed to her ear. I couldn't hear the person on the other end, but her side of the conversation made my blood run cold. "You need to stop calling me at home," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's too risky. He's already suspicious." A pause. Then her tone turned sharp. "I told you I'll handle it. Just stay out of it. You don't want him finding out the truth, do you?" She ended the call abruptly, tossing her phone onto the coffee table with a frustrated sigh. I leaned back against the wall, my head spinning. Amanda had lied to me. Ethan had lied to me. And Ryan. If my gut was right, Ryan had betrayed me in the worst way possible. The rage building inside me was volcanic, but I forced myself to stay calm. Blowing up now wouldn't help. If I was going to confront them, I needed a plan. And if I was going to destroy them, I needed to be smart. I hit save on the footage and backed it up to my laptop. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't sleep that night. The video replayed in my head on an endless loop, Amanda's voice gnawing at my sanity. "Your real dad wouldn't want that." I sat in the kitchen with my laptop, staring at the security camera app, torn between wanting to uncover more and dreading what else I might find. By dawn, I'd combed through a dozen clips. Most of them seemed harmless. Ethan playing video games, Amanda cooking, the dog curled up by the couch. But each time I heard their voices, my heart would race, anticipating some new betrayal. It wasn't until I checked the camera in the hallway near our bedroom that I struck gold. The clip was from the night before I came home. Amanda was pacing outside the bedroom, her phone pressed to her ear again. I could see the tension in her body, the way she gripped her free hand into a fist as she spoke. "What do you expect me to do?" she hissed, her voice barely audible over the sound of her footsteps. "He's already suspicious. He installed those cameras, for God's sake." She stopped and leaned against the wall, lowering her voice. You don't get it. If he finds out that Ethan isn't his, he'll kill us both. Do you hear me? Both of us. And don't think for a second he won't. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath caught in my throat. Ryan, she said, the name hanging in the air like a noose. You have to stay away, at least until I figure out how to handle this. I'm not losing everything because you can't keep it in your pants. Ryan. The room spun. My suspicions had been confirmed. But hearing his name from her mouth made it real in a way I wasn't ready for. My own brother. The man I'd trusted my whole life. The man who'd stood next to me at my wedding, grinning like he hadn't just destroyed my future before it even began. My grip on the laptop tightened. I wanted to smash it, to hurl it across the room and let the rage consume me. But I couldn't. Not yet. This wasn't just about my anger anymore. This was war. By the time Amanda woke up and came downstairs, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to confront her outright. Not yet. If she was going to play games, so would I. Only I'd be better at it. Morning, she said casually, heading for the coffee machine. She didn't even glance my way, which made it easier to hide the storm brewing inside me. Morning, I replied, my tone as neutral as I could manage. She poured herself a cup and leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. For a moment, I wondered how many texts between her and Ryan were sitting there, just out of reach. I wanted to grab the phone, to shove it in her face and demand answers. Instead, I smiled. I was thinking, I said, my voice light. We should have a family movie night tonight. You, me, and Ethan. It's been a while since we all spent time together. Amanda froze for half a second, so brief I almost missed it. Then she plastered on that fake smile I'd come to hate. That sounds nice, she said too quickly. I'm sure Ethan will love that. Great, I said, keeping my smile firmly in place. I wasn't lying about the movie night, but I wasn't planning on watching anything on Netflix. By evening, I'd set everything up. I connected the security camera footage to the TV, disguising it as a streaming app. Amanda wouldn't suspect a thing until it was too late. Ethan was the first to join me in the living room, flopping onto the couch with a bowl of popcorn. What are we watching? He asked, his tone cheerful and unsuspecting. You'll see, I said, ruffling his hair. I couldn't help the pang of guilt that hit me. He was just a kid. None of this was his fault. Amanda came in a few minutes later, wine glass in hand. She sat on the other side of the couch, as far from me as possible without making it obvious. What's the movie? She asked, her smile tight. I grabbed the remote. It's a surprise. The first clip I played was innocuous enough. Just Ethan playing outside in the backyard. Amanda sipped her wine, looking bored. The second clip was from the kitchen. Amanda and Ethan whispering about keeping things between them. Her grip on the glass tightened, but she said nothing. The third clip was the one in the hallway. The one where she said Ryan's name. Amanda's face went white. Ethan froze, staring at the screen like it was a horror movie he couldn't look away from. What the hell is this? Amanda demanded, her voice shaking. I hit pause and turned to face her. The mask was gone now. My anger was out in the open, and I wasn't holding back. It's the truth, Amanda. Something you've been hiding from me for 12 goddamn years. Ethan looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. Dad, don't. I held up a hand, cutting him off. I don't blame you. This isn't your fault. Amanda stood up, the wine glass trembling in her hand. You're blowing this out of proportion. It's not what it looks like. I laughed, a bitter sound that filled the room. Not what it looks like. You lied to me about my son. You cheated on me with my own brother. And now you're trying to spin it like I'm the crazy one. Ethan's voice broke through the tension, shaky and small. Is it true? He asked, looking at Amanda. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked scared. I turned back to the TV and pressed play. The room filled with Amanda's voice. If he finds out that Ethan isn't his, he'll kill us both. Do you hear me? Both of us. When the clip ended, I looked at her, my voice cold. Start talking, Amanda, or I promise you, this is just the beginning. For the first time since this nightmare began, Amanda had no clever retort, no fake smile to hide behind. She was cornered and she knew it. The game had just begun, and I was holding all the cards. Amanda's silence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. She stared at the frozen image on the TV screen, her face pale and her hands gripping the wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Ethan sat motionless on the couch, his eyes darting between me and Amanda, desperate for someone to tell him this wasn't happening. I wasn't going to break the silence. Let her squirm. Let her feel even a fraction of the betrayal that was burning through me like acid. Finally, Amanda's voice cracked through the tension. This is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated, my tone sharp and mocking. You were caught on camera saying Ethan isn't my son and calling my brother by name. So, Amanda, help me understand. She stepped forward, putting the wine glass down on the coffee table as if buying herself time. Okay, listen, I can explain. Then explain, I said, my voice cold. Start with why you've been lying to me for 12 years. Start with Ryan. Her eyes darted to Ethan, who was now trembling. Not here, she whispered. Not in front of him. No, I snapped. He stays. He deserves to know the truth, Amanda. You owe him that much. Amanda's lips parted as if to argue, but she must have realized she was out of moves. Her shoulders slumped, and she dropped into the armchair across from me, staring at the floor. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said softly, her voice barely audible. It was a mistake. One stupid mistake. Stop wasting time and just say it. She flinched at the venom in my voice, but she pressed on. It happened before we got married. Ryan, he was going through a rough time. He'd just broken up with his girlfriend, and he was drinking a lot. I was there for him, and one thing led to another. I felt the bile rise in my throat. One thing led to another? That's your excuse? You slept with my brother, Amanda. My brother. Ethan's small voice cut through the storm of my anger. Mom! He looked like he was trying to hold himself together, but tears brimmed in his eyes. Dad? Is he really not my dad? Amanda's face crumpled. Ethan, sweetheart, answer him, I roared, slamming my hand on the coffee table so hard that Amanda and Ethan both jumped. Yes, Amanda blurted out, the words slicing through the room. Yes, okay? Ryan is your biological father, but it doesn't change anything. You're still his son. You're still ours. I shot to my feet, the rage boiling over. Don't you dare. Don't you dare try to soften this. You've lied to me for over a decade. You made me believe Ethan was my son, made me love him, and all this time you knew the truth. You've made a fool out of me, Amanda. Tears spilled down Amanda's cheeks. I didn't plan this, okay? I didn't know I was pregnant until after we were married. And I thought it didn't matter. Didn't matter? I repeated, my voice shaking. You knew I wasn't Ethan's father, and you decided it didn't matter? You built our entire life on a lie. Ethan was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. Dad, please, he begged, his voice breaking. I knelt in front of him, gripping his shoulders gently. Ethan, listen to me. You are my son, no matter what. None of this is your fault. Do you understand me? He nodded, but his tears didn't stop. I stood and turned back to Amanda, who was staring at me with a mixture of guilt and fear. And Ryan? I asked, my voice cold again. What does he know about this? She hesitated, and that hesitation was all the confirmation I needed. Of course, I muttered, laughing bitterly. Of course he knows. This whole time, I've been the idiot who didn't see it. Amanda tried to stand, but I held up a hand, stopping her. Don't. Just don't. I can't even look at you right now. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the house. I didn't drive far, just enough to clear my head, enough to stop myself from smashing everything in sight. I pulled into an empty parking lot, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The betrayal was suffocating. My wife, my brother, my family, everything I thought I knew was a lie. But the rage wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the pain, the love I still felt for Ethan, the memories of the life I'd built, now twisted into something unrecognizable. And Ryan, oh Ryan, he wasn't going to get away with this. Amanda might have destroyed my marriage, but Ryan had betrayed his own blood. I wasn't going to let them ruin my life without consequences. They thought I was clueless. They thought I was too stupid to put the pieces together. But they were wrong. I was going to destroy them both, piece by piece. I didn't go home that night. Couldn't. Instead, I parked in a dark corner of a 24-hour diner parking lot, staring blankly at the dashboard. My mind replayed Amanda's confession over and over, each repetition fueling a fire I was struggling to control. Ryan. Every time I thought about him, a fresh wave of rage threatened to consume me. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd stolen my life, my family, and then had the audacity to stand beside me, pretending nothing was wrong, all while knowing Ethan was his. But this wasn't the time to lose control. Not yet. If I was going to make them pay, I needed to be smarter than both of them. Pulling out my phone, I searched for Ryan's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over the call button. No, not yet. A direct confrontation wouldn't get me what I needed. Instead, I tapped into my old habit from work, digging up information people didn't want me to find. I started with Ryan's social media, scrolling through his posts and tagged photos. At first, there was nothing unusual. Pictures of him with friends, work events, a few of him at the gym. But then I found one from 2 years ago, a photo I'd never seen before. It was a candid shot of Ryan and Ethan, standing together at a family barbecue. Ethan was holding a football, grinning ear to ear, while Ryan had one arm slung casually over his shoulder. The caption hit me like a punch to the gut. Like father, like son. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. How had I missed it? The way they stood, the tilt of their heads, it was like looking at a mirror. My stomach churned as I realized just how brazen Ryan had been, hiding in plain sight. I scrolled further, finding more little clues. Ryan commenting on Ethan's posts with inside jokes I didn't recognize. Photos of Ryan at Ethan's soccer games, ones I hadn't even been invited to. My hands were shaking as I typed in a new search, Ryan's work address. He'd mentioned a few months ago that his office had moved to a new downtown location. I jotted down the address, my mind racing. If Ryan had been bold enough to parade around like some shadow dad, there was a good chance he'd left more evidence behind. And if I was going to confront him, I needed every piece of leverage I could get. The next morning, I parked outside Ryan's building, waiting for him to show up. My car was angled so I could see the entrance without being seen. Around 8:45 a.m., Ryan strolled up the sidewalk, his suit crisp and his briefcase swinging at his side. He looked every bit the polished professional, completely unaware that his entire world was about to come crashing down. I didn't follow him inside. Not yet. Instead, I made my way to a nearby coffee shop, setting up at a table by the window with a clear view of the building. It was time to dig deeper. Ryan's personal email wasn't hard to guess. His company had a predictable format, and I'd known his passwords back when we were kids. I tried a few combinations, and on the fourth attempt, I was in. What I found made my blood boil. There were dozens of emails between Ryan and Amanda, some dating back years. Most of them were mundane, disguised as casual updates about family gatherings or Ethan's school activities. But a few were anything but. One from 3 years ago read, "He's starting to ask questions. What do we tell him if he figures it out?" Ryan's response was chilling. "We don't tell him anything. He's too stupid to see what's right in front of him. Let him think he's the perfect dad. It keeps things simple for everyone." Another email, more recent, sent shivers down my spine. "He's getting suspicious. Be careful what you say around Ethan. If he puts this together, it'll ruin everything for all of us." They were mocking me, planning behind my back, treating me like I was too blind, too dumb, to see what they were doing. But now I saw everything. By the time I got home that evening, I had a plan. Amanda was in the kitchen, acting like nothing had happened. She glanced up when I walked in, her eyes cautious but calculating. "Where were you last night?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Thinking," I said simply, my voice cold. She hesitated, searching my face for a clue. "And," I smiled, a slow, deliberate grin that I knew would unsettle her. "And I realized something. You and Ryan have been underestimating me for a long time." Her expression froze, the color draining from her face. "What are you talking about?" "You'll find out soon enough." I walked past her, heading upstairs to see Ethan. This wasn't over. Not even close. I waited until Amanda left the house. She said she was running errands, but I knew better. Every move she made now felt like a calculated attempt to keep control of the situation. But I wasn't the man she thought I was anymore. I'd shed that skin the moment I realized what she'd done. Once she was gone, I headed straight to the spare bedroom. It was where we kept the things that didn't fit anywhere else. Holiday decorations, old family photos, and boxes of random junk we'd never unpacked when we moved in. I dug through the clutter until I found what I was looking for. The little fireproof safe Amanda had insisted we buy a few years back. Her safe. The one she never let me touch. The lock was simple, one of those 4-digit combination jobs. She probably thought I'd never guess the code. But Amanda wasn't as clever as she liked to believe. I tried Ethan's birthday first. Nothing. Then our anniversary. Still no luck. I stared at the safe for a moment, my frustration mounting. Then it hit me. Amanda wasn't sentimental, not in the ways that mattered anyway. Her loyalty was to herself. I entered her birthday. The lock clicked open. Inside was a stack of papers neatly arranged. Most of them looked unimportant. Bills, some old insurance documents, but one envelope caught my eye. It was thick, bulging with what looked like folded-up papers. My name wasn't on it, but I opened it anyway. What I found made my stomach turn. At the top of the first page was the letterhead of a private paternity testing service. My hands trembled as I scanned the document. The date was from over a decade ago, shortly after Ethan was born. Amanda's name was listed as the mother, mine as the supposed father. But in bold, unforgiving letters at the bottom of the page were the results. 0% probability of paternity. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I flipped to the next document. It was another paternity test, this time listing Ryan as the potential father. The result was clear. 99.9% probability of paternity. I stared at the papers, the weight of the truth pressing down on me like a physical force. Amanda had known. From the very beginning, she'd known Ethan wasn't mine. And she'd known exactly who his father was. I didn't hear Amanda come back. By the time I realized she was home, she was standing in the doorway of the spare bedroom, her face pale and her eyes locked on the papers in my hands. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice sharp with panic. I stood slowly, holding the documents up for her to see. "You tell me." She stepped into the room, her movements slow and deliberate, like she was approaching a wild animal. "It's not what you think." "Don't," I snapped, my voice cutting through her excuses like a blade. "I'm done with your lies, Amanda. You knew all along. You knew he wasn't mine, and you still let me believe. I didn't have a choice," she shouted, her voice cracking. "What was I supposed to do? Huh? Tell you the truth and watch you walk away? Let you hate me? I did what I had to do to protect this family." "Protect this family?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call lying to my face for 12 years? You didn't protect anything, Amanda. You destroyed it." She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. "And Ryan?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Was he in on this from the start? Did he help you come up with the plan? Or was this all you?" Her silence told me everything I needed to know. "Unbelievable," I muttered, shaking my head. "You both played me like a fool." Amanda took a step closer, her hands outstretched like she thought she could fix this. "It's not like that, I swear. Ryan didn't want this. Stop," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare try to make him out to be a victim. He's just as guilty as you are, and you both know it." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I'd given her my love, my trust, my life, and she'd thrown it all away. "I don't know what you think you're going to do," she said, her voice trembling. "But think about Ethan. He's innocent in all of this." Her words made my jaw clench. Ethan, the only part of this mess that still mattered to me. "You don't get to use him as a shield," I said, my voice cold. "Not after what you've done." I pushed past her, the papers still clutched in my hand. She called after me, but I didn't stop. I had a new plan now, and it was time to put it into motion. I left Amanda standing in the doorway, her face frozen in some mixture of fear and desperation. I didn't care. She could drown in her excuses for all I cared. The truth was out now, and I wasn't going to be the one gasping for air anymore. But there was one thing left to do before I could fully set my plan in motion. I needed to confront Ryan. The idea of seeing him face to face made my blood boil. My own brother. He'd betrayed me in the worst possible way and had been smug enough to let me raise his son for 12 years. But I wasn't going to let my anger get the better of me. Not yet. If this confrontation was going to happen, it would happen on my terms, and I'd make damn sure I had the upper hand. That afternoon, I called Ryan. "Hey, man," he answered, his voice as casual and confident as ever. "What's up?" It took every ounce of restraint not to let my rage spill through the phone. "Not much," I said, forcing my tone to stay light. "I was just thinking we haven't caught up in a while. How about grabbing a drink tonight?" There was a brief pause, just long enough for suspicion to creep into his voice. "Yeah, sure. Everything okay?" "Of course," I lied. "I just need some brother time, you know? It's been too long." Ryan chuckled, and I wanted to reach through the phone and strangle him. "All right, sounds good. How about that bar near your place?" 7 o'clock. "Perfect," I said. "See you then." By the time I arrived at the bar, I'd rehearsed every word I planned to say. The papers from Amanda's safe were tucked into my jacket pocket, my secret weapon for when the moment was right. Ryan was already there, sitting at a table near the back with a beer in hand. He looked up when he saw me, grinning like the bastard he was. "Hey, there he is," he said, raising his glass. I forced a smile and sat across from him, ordering a drink of my own. We made small talk at first, just like we always had. Work, sports, family, though every mention of Ethan felt like a dagger to the chest. Ryan didn't seem the least bit uncomfortable, which only confirmed what I already knew. He thought he'd gotten away with it. When the moment felt right, I leaned back in my chair, swirling my drink. "You know," I said casually, "I've been thinking a lot about family lately." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah." I nodded, my gaze steady. "Specifically about trust. How much you can really trust the people closest to you." Ryan's smile faltered, just a fraction. Is everything okay, man?" "Funny you should ask," I said, leaning forward. "See, I've had some revelations lately. About you. And Amanda." The color drained from his face. "I know," I said, my voice low but firm. "I know everything, Ryan." He opened his mouth to respond, but I wasn't done. I pulled the papers from my jacket and slid them across the table. "Go ahead. Take a look. You'll recognize them." Ryan's hands shook as he picked up the documents, his eyes scanning the damning words. His expression shifted from shock to guilt to panic. "Look, he started, but I cut him off. "Save it," I snarled. "You don't get to explain this away. You slept with my wife. You lied to me for 12 years. You let me raise your son. Do you have any idea what that's done to me?" Ryan swallowed hard, his usual charm nowhere to be found. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Oh, spare me the excuses," I said, my voice rising. "You meant for it to happen, Ryan, and then you let it keep happening. You're a coward and a liar, just like her." His hands balled into fists on the table, but he didn't dare meet my eyes. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my tone sharp and deliberate. "You're going to stay the hell away from me, from my house, from Ethan. Do you understand me?" Ryan finally looked up, his expression desperate. "But Ethan is my son," I growled, cutting him off again. "You don't get to call him that. You gave up that right the moment you decided to betray me." Ryan opened his mouth again, but I stood, slamming my empty glass on the table. "Don't even think about fighting me on this," I said, my voice cold. "If you do, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are, and I guarantee you won't like the fallout." I turned and walked away, leaving him sitting there with the papers spread out in front of him. He didn't follow me. As I drove home, the anger that had fueled me all day began to fade, replaced by something darker. Satisfaction. This was only the beginning. Ryan and Amanda thought they could play me, but they didn't realize who they were dealing with. I wasn't just going to cut them out of my life. I was going to destroy theirs, piece by piece. I didn't go straight home after confronting Ryan. There was still too much fire in my chest, too much rage clawing at my ribs, demanding an outlet. Driving aimlessly through the city, I began to piece together the next step in my plan. Ryan had looked broken when I left him at the bar. Good. That was just a taste of what was coming. Amanda, though, she was still in the game, still maneuvering to protect herself. I needed to corner her completely, to take away every shred of control she thought she had. And for that, I needed Ethan. He was the last innocent piece of this puzzle, and I wasn't going to let Amanda manipulate him any longer. She'd already used him as a shield, as leverage. Not anymore. If Ethan was going to know the truth, he was going to hear it from me. By the time I got home, it was late. Amanda was in the living room, her face lit by the blue glow of the TV. She didn't look up when I walked in, but I could feel the tension radiating off her. She knew I'd seen Ryan. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice tight. I didn't answer. Instead, I headed upstairs to Ethan's room. Amanda called after me, her tone rising with panic. "What are you doing? You can't just..." I slammed Ethan's door shut behind me. He was sitting on his bed, scrolling through his phone, and looked up in surprise. "Dad?" he said, his voice cautious. "What's going on?" I sat down on the edge of the bed, facing him. For a moment, I didn't know how to start. How do you tell a kid that everything he thought he knew about his family was a lie? "Ethan," I said finally, my voice steady, "we need to talk. About you. About Mom. About everything." His brow furrowed, and I could see the fear creeping into his eyes. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," I said quickly. "You haven't done anything wrong. But there are things you need to know. Things I should have told you sooner." I told him everything. I told him about the footage from the cameras, about Amanda's lies, about Ryan. I didn't sugarcoat it, but I didn't let my anger spill out either. This wasn't his fault. None of it was. When I finished, Ethan just stared at me, his face pale and his eyes brimming with tears. "So, you're not my dad?" he whispered. The question shattered me. I reached out, gripping his shoulders firmly. "Listen to me, Ethan. I don't care what those tests say. I've been your dad since the day you were born, and nothing is going to change that. Do you understand me?" He nodded, but the tears started to fall. "Why would Mom do this? Why would Uncle Ryan?" I pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly as he cried. "Because they're selfish," I said softly. "They cared more about their lies than about how this would hurt us. But you and me, we're going to get through this. Together." Ethan nodded against my chest, his breathing shaky. When I let him go, I wiped the tears from his face. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "I need you to be strong. No matter what happens, I want you to remember that I love you. Okay?" He nodded again, his eyes filled with a determination that surprised me. "Good," I said, standing up. "Now stay in here for a while. I need to talk to your mom." When I came back downstairs, Amanda was pacing the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She froze when she saw me. "What did you say to him?" she demanded. I ignored her and grabbed the remote, turning off the TV. The room plunged into silence. "Ethan knows," I said simply. Her eyes widened. "You had no right." "I had every right," I snapped, cutting her off. "You've been lying to both of us for years. You don't get to decide how this plays out anymore." Amanda's face twisted in fury. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've torn this family apart." I laughed bitterly. "No, Amanda. You and Ryan did that. All I've done is shine a light on the mess you've been hiding in the dark." She stepped closer, her voice lowering to a hiss. "What do you want from me, huh? You want me to beg? To apologize? Fine. I'm sorry. Okay? I made a mistake. But you need to let this go before you ruin everything." "Ruin everything?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Amanda, there's nothing left to ruin. You destroyed our marriage. You betrayed me. You turned our lives into a lie, and now you expect me to just move on." Her eyes flashed with something I hadn't seen before. Fear. "You're not going to get away with this," I said, my voice cold. "You and Ryan think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming." Amanda took a step back, her bravado crumbling. "What are you talking about?" I leaned in, my voice low and deadly. "You'll see." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, her face pale and her hands trembling. This was just the beginning. The house was quiet, too quiet, as I paced the kitchen. Ethan had retreated to his room, his door locked, and Amanda hadn't moved from the living room since I left her there. My words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and for once, I could see the cracks in her armor. She was scared. Good. She should be. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. If Amanda thought she could worm her way out of this with apologies and crocodile tears, she was dead wrong. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about dismantling the empire of lies she and Ryan had built. The next day, I set the final pieces of my plan into motion. Step 1. Leverage the truth. I started with my lawyer. I kept quiet about this mess up until now, but I wasn't going to give Amanda or Ryan the chance to manipulate the narrative. With the paternity test and the security footage in hand, I laid out everything for my attorney. He listened quietly, his expression growing darker with every word. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. "This is a lot," he said finally. "If what you're telling me is true, you have grounds for divorce. And with the evidence you've provided, custody of Ethan shouldn't be an issue." I nodded. "That's what I want. Full custody. Amanda can fight me all she wants, but she's not going to win." The lawyer hesitated. "You understand this will be messy, right? She'll push back. And if Ryan gets involved, let him," I said, my voice cold. "I want them both to know exactly what they've done." Step 2. Confront Ryan one last time. I waited until I knew Ryan would be home. His apartment wasn't far. A sleek bachelor pad in a high-rise downtown. The kind of place that screamed success but hid the rot underneath. When he opened the door, his face fell immediately. "You again," he muttered, trying to close the door. I shoved my foot in the gap, forcing it open. "We're not finished, Ryan," he sighed, stepping aside reluctantly. "What do you want now?" I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the pristine apartment. It was disgusting how neat and polished his life seemed compared to the chaos he'd caused in mine. "You're going to stay out of my way," I said, turning to face him. "No more calls, no more emails, no more showing up at family events like nothing happened. You don't exist to me anymore. You don't exist to Ethan." Ryan bristled, crossing his arms. "Ethan has a right to know who his real father is." I took a step closer, my voice low and dangerous. "You're not his father. You're a donor at best. And if you try to interfere with his life, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. Your career, your reputation, your precious image. It'll all be gone." He blinked, his confidence faltering. "You wouldn't. Try me," I snarled. Ryan held my gaze for a long moment, but I saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't used to being cornered, and he had no idea how to fight back. "Fine," he said finally, his voice bitter. "But don't think this makes you a saint. You're just as much of a liar as I am." I laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "The difference is, I've been living someone else's lie. Now I'm done playing your game." I left without another word, slamming the door behind me. Step 3. Amanda. By the time I got home, Amanda was waiting for me in the kitchen. She looked like she hadn't slept, her hair disheveled and her eyes bloodshot. "Where were you?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Taking care of business," I said coolly. Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I've had enough of your lies," I said, tossing a manila envelope onto the counter. "Inside is everything I've given to my lawyer, paternity tests, emails, footage from the cameras. You're done, Amanda. This marriage is over." She stared at the envelope, her hands trembling. "You can't do this." "I can, and I am," I said, my voice steady. "You lied to me. You betrayed me. And now you're going to face the consequences." Her composure cracked. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up, but we can fix this. For Ethan's sake." "Ethan's sake?" I interrupted, my anger flaring. "You don't get to use him as an excuse anymore. He deserves better than you. Hell, we both do." She took a step closer, her eyes desperate. "What do you want from me? Do you want me to grovel? To beg?" "I want you out of my life," I said coldly. "And if you think for a second that I'm letting you drag Ethan down with you, think again." Amanda stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the words. Finally, she whispered, You really hate me, don't you? I didn't answer. Instead, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the kitchen. This wasn't just about hate. It was about justice. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. I got full custody of Ethan. Amanda didn't fight me as hard as I expected. Whether out of guilt, shame, or sheer exhaustion, I'll never know. Ryan slunk away into obscurity, his job and reputation in tatters after I quietly shared just enough of his secrets to ensure he wouldn't show his face again. As for Ethan, he struggled at first. He asked tough questions, ones I didn't always have the answers to. Why would his mom and uncle do this? Did it mean he wasn't part of my family anymore? Each time, I told him the truth as simply as I could. People make terrible mistakes, but those mistakes don't define him. And as for me, I learned something about myself, too. For years, I thought being a good man meant putting your head down, working hard, and trusting those closest to you. But trust isn't blind, it's earned. And sometimes, the people you think you know best are the ones who'll hurt you the most. Ethan and I have moved on. He's my son in every way that matters, and nothing Amanda or Ryan did can take that away. For the men reading this, especially those in my generation, protect what matters, but don't let loyalty become a blindfold. Love your family, but don't forget to watch for the cracks beneath the surface. Trust is a beautiful thing, but it's only as strong as the people behind it. Because at the end of the day, what defines you isn't who betrayed you, it's how you chose to rebuild. Ryan flatlined 10 minutes ago. Where the hell are you? I barked into the phone, my voice sharp with desperation and fury. The hospital hallway was chaos. Nurses rushing, machines wailing behind me, and my son's small, broken body being fought for by a team of doctors. I'm in a meeting, Laura replied calmly, her tone so detached it felt like a slap across my face. A meeting? I spat. You mean with Greg? Don't lie to me. Not now. My grip tightened on the phone as I paced the cold, sterile corridor, trying to keep my voice steady even as my world fell apart. The silence on the other end was damning. It wasn't denial, it was confirmation. I'll be there soon, she said finally, her words clipped, like she was being inconvenienced. Soon, I hissed. Ryan doesn't have soon, Laura. Either you get here now, or don't bother ever calling yourself his mother again. I hung up, my chest heaving. My mind was racing, half with fear for Ryan, half with a rage so deep I could barely see straight. For months, I'd known something was wrong. The whispered calls, the unexplained trips, the way she'd grown colder and more distant even as Ryan's condition worsened. But nothing could have prepared me for this. 2 hours later, Laura finally showed up. She strolled in like she was heading to a boardroom, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. Her outfit, a fitted navy blazer and skirt, was pristine, her hair perfectly styled. She looked every bit the polished professional, not a mother rushing to her dying child's side. She stopped in front of me, barely glancing toward the ICU door. What happened? She asked, her voice flat. What happened? My voice cracked with disbelief. What happened is your son is dying, Laura. Dying. And you were too busy with Greg to give a damn. Her expression barely shifted. She crossed her arms, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. Mark, I told you I had a meeting. I can't drop everything every time you panic. The audacity of her words sent a wave of heat through me. I stepped closer, my voice lowering to a dangerous growl. Panic? He's your son, Laura. You've been avoiding him for days, making excuses. And now he's lying in there fighting for his life, while you're out with your lover. Don't exaggerate, she snapped, her tone icy. You always do this. You're so dramatic. Dramatic? I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her, to make her see what she was doing, to Ryan, to me, to our family. But instead, I turned away and gestured toward the glass wall of the ICU. Look at him, I said, my voice trembling with fury and pain. Go ahead. Take a good, long look at what you've been ignoring. Look at the son you're about to lose because you were too busy screwing around to care. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret, guilt, something human. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She sighed and finally stepped up to the glass, peering in at Ryan's frail, motionless body. He looks fine to me, she said, her voice void of emotion. I froze, my mind struggling to process what I just heard. He looks fine, I repeated, my voice rising. Laura, he's dying. He flatlined earlier. They brought him back, but they don't know how long he's got. And you're standing here acting like this is just another inconvenience in your schedule. Her eyes narrowed, and she turned to face me fully, her posture rigid. Don't make this about me, Mark. You're the one who's always been too controlling, too demanding. Maybe if you'd paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have needed Greg. The words hit like a sledgehammer. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The audacity, the sheer cruelty, of blaming me for her affair, while our son lay dying feet away, was more than I could comprehend. I stepped back, shaking my head, my hands balled into fists at my sides. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice low and venomous. This isn't just about me, Laura. This is about Ryan. This is about the life you've been so quick to throw away for some pathetic fling. She rolled her eyes, a dismissive gesture that made my blood boil. You always make everything sound so dramatic, Mark. I don't have time for this. And with that, she turned on her heel and walked away. Not into the ICU to see Ryan, but toward the elevators. As I stood there, watching her leave, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just betrayal. It was war. Laura's heels clicked against the cold tile floor as she walked away, leaving a trail of icy indifference in her wake. I stood frozen, disbelief tightening around my chest like a vice. She hadn't even stepped into Ryan's room. Not a glance, not a touch, not a single ounce of maternal instinct. My fists clenched as the elevator doors closed behind her, and I was left staring at my reflection in the glass of the ICU. Ryan's small, fragile body lay still, surrounded by wires and machines keeping him alive. His chest rose and fell with a mechanical rhythm. But the boy I knew, full of curiosity and laughter, was barely there anymore. And his mother, the woman I'd trusted to stand beside me in our darkest hour, had chosen her lover over her son. I stormed out of the ICU hallway, my mind reeling. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was visceral. Her cold dismissal, her audacity to blame me. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the life she was dismantling piece by piece. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my spiraling thoughts. It was from one of Ryan's nurses, a text letting me know they'd stabilized him for now. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. My rage boiled back to the surface as I stared at the hospital's exit doors. I wasn't going to let Laura's betrayal go unanswered. I called her as I marched toward my car, the phone ringing incessantly until she finally picked up. "What now, Mark?" she answered, her tone laced with irritation. "You're unbelievable," I snarled. "You couldn't even fake concern for 5 minutes. You just walked out. Do you even care about him? About anything besides yourself and Greg?" "Mark, I'm not doing this with you right now," she replied, her voice sharp. "I told you, I'm dealing with a lot." "No," I interrupted. "You're not dealing with anything. I'm here, fighting for Ryan, while you're busy screwing around with Greg and playing the victim. But guess what? I'm done playing the fool." The line went silent for a moment, and then she laughed. "You're always so dramatic," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with controlling everything, I wouldn't need a reason to look elsewhere." I hung up, my hands trembling with fury. I didn't need her excuses. I needed answers. My car roared to life, and without a second thought, I drove to Greg's dealership. It was a bold move, maybe reckless, but I didn't care. I had enough. Enough lies, enough betrayal, enough of Laura's smug indifference. When I walked into the dealership, Greg was leaning against the counter, chatting with a customer. His face paled the moment he saw me, and he quickly excused himself. "Mark," he stammered, holding up his hands defensively. "I wasn't expecting." "No, you weren't," I said, slamming a folder onto the counter. Inside were the bank statements, proof of the money Laura had funneled to their shared account. "Tell me about this. Now." Greg looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. I don't know what you're talking about," he mumbled. "Don't lie to me," I growled, leaning closer. "This is my family's money. Money meant for my son's treatment. And you had no problem taking it." He fidgeted, his hands shaking as he reached for the folder. "She told me it was hers," he said quietly. "She said it was savings, something she'd been putting away for years. It wasn't hers to give." I snapped, my voice low and dangerous. "And you knew it, so don't pretend you're innocent in all this." Greg's face flushed, and he looked down at the papers. Then, as if something inside him broke, he sighed and leaned back against the counter. "She said she needed a safety net," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "For when she left you." The words hit me like a freight train. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. She wasn't just lying to me. She wasn't just betraying me. She was planning to leave us, Ryan and me, behind completely. I stared at Greg, my mind racing. "Did she tell you when?" I asked, my voice trembling. He hesitated, then shook his head. "She didn't say, just that she wanted to start fresh, somewhere far away." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. This wasn't just an affair. This was calculated, cold. She was planning her escape while her son was dying in a hospital bed. "I hope she was worth it," I said, my voice ice cold, before turning and walking out. As I drove back to the hospital, the weight of it all settled on my shoulders. Laura's betrayal wasn't just as a wife, it was as a mother. And for that, I would never forgive her. That night, I sat in Ryan's room, the rhythmic beeping of machines filling the silence. His small hand rested in mine, and I felt the crushing weight of responsibility settle deeper into my chest. Laura was gone, physically and emotionally, and I couldn't count on her anymore. Protecting Ryan was on me now. The nurse had said earlier that the next 24 hours would be critical. I couldn't help but glance at the door every few minutes, half expecting Laura to come back, to prove me wrong, to fall apart and beg forgiveness. But the door stayed closed. She wasn't coming. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. When Ryan stirred slightly, his weak eyes fluttering open for a brief moment, I leaned closer. "Dad," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm here, buddy," I said, gripping his hand tighter. "Where's Mom?" The question hit me harder than any of Laura's lies ever had. I couldn't tell him the truth. Not like this. "She'll be here soon," I lied, my voice trembling. He nodded faintly and drifted back into unconsciousness. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't sit here waiting for her to grow a conscience. I needed to act. As soon as Ryan fell back asleep, I stepped out of his room and pulled out my phone. "Peter," I said when my lawyer answered groggily. "I need your help. It's urgent." It was late, but Peter didn't hesitate. "What's going on?" I told him everything. Laura's absence, her affair, and, most damning of all, the money. "Do you have proof?" he asked, his tone sharpening. "Bank statements, transactions, all in black and white," I replied. "And I'll get more if I have to." Peter sighed. "Mark, this is serious. If she's diverting family funds and planning to leave, we need to move fast. I'll start drafting paperwork for an emergency custody hearing. You'll need to gather every piece of evidence you can." I thanked him and hung up, my heart pounding. Laura thought she could walk away from this unscathed. She thought she could betray us, take what wasn't hers, and leave without consequences. Not on my watch. The next morning, after ensuring Ryan was stable, I returned home for the first time in days. The house felt eerily empty, as if Laura had already vanished from our lives. I went straight to her office, tearing through drawers, files, and cabinets. And then I found it. A hidden folder tucked beneath a stack of tax documents. Inside were receipts, hotel bookings, expensive dinners, and a flight itinerary for 2 to the Cayman Islands. The departure date was just 2 weeks away. I stared at the papers, my stomach twisting in knots. She wasn't just abandoning Ryan and me. She was planning to flee the country. But that wasn't the worst of it. Buried among the receipts was a transfer record, showing tens of thousands of dollars moved to an offshore account. My mind raced. That money wasn't hers. It was supposed to cover Ryan's treatments, his medication, his care. I clenched the papers in my hands, the weight of her betrayal almost unbearable. She wasn't just selfish. She was dangerous. My phone buzzed. It was Peter. "Mark, we've got a court date," he said. "Next week. You'd better come prepared." "I will," I replied, my voice hard. "I've got more than enough to bury her." But even as I hung up, I knew this was just the beginning. The evidence was damning, but Laura wasn't the type to back down quietly. If she wanted a fight, she was going to get one, and I was ready to do whatever it took to protect my son. As I stared at the damning documents in front of me, one thought burned in my mind. Laura had no idea who she was dealing with. The morning of the court date arrived faster than I expected. I had spent every spare moment since discovering Laura's secret piecing together my case. Peter had helped me prepare, ensuring every document, every receipt, and every bank transfer was airtight. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about custody. It was about Ryan's future. I entered the courtroom with a folder under my arm, the weight of its contents feeling heavier than it should. Laura was already there, sitting at the defendant's table. She wore a sleek black suit and carried an air of unbothered confidence, her face calm as if this were just another day at the office. She didn't even look at me. Instead, she busied herself scrolling through her phone, her attorney whispering something in her ear. The sight only fueled my anger. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The room was silent as the proceedings began, but the tension was palpable. My attorney presented our case methodically, laying out the evidence piece by piece. The bank statements came first, then the receipts for her secret trips with Greg, and finally the offshore transfer. The courtroom murmured when Peter unveiled the flight itinerary. Laura shifted in her seat, her composure cracking for the first time. She planned to leave the country, Peter stated firmly, with funds that were meant for her son's medical treatment. A son she has neglected while engaging in an extramarital affair. Laura's attorney stood to counter, his voice smooth and calculated. My client disputes these claims. The funds in question were part of her personal savings, and the trips were business-related. Business-related? I nearly laughed out loud. The gall of their defense was astounding. But I stayed silent, knowing the real bombshell was yet to come. Peter turned to the judge. Your Honor, we'd like to call a witness to testify to the nature of these trips and the defendant's intentions regarding her family. The judge nodded and Greg was brought in. He looked uncomfortable, his usually cocky demeanor replaced with visible unease. As he took the stand, his eyes darted between me and Laura. Mr. Gregson, Peter began, his tone calm but firm. You've been involved with Mrs. Mitchell for several months, correct? Greg swallowed hard, glancing briefly at Laura, who shot him a glare so sharp it could have cut glass. Yes, he admitted quietly. And during this time, did she discuss any plans regarding her marriage or her son? Greg hesitated, his hands gripping the edges of the stand. She said she was unhappy, he muttered, that she felt trapped. And did she mention plans to leave her family? Peter pressed. Greg hesitated again, clearly torn. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Finally, he nodded. Yes, she said she wanted to start over, somewhere far away. And did she discuss financial arrangements to facilitate this plan? Greg's face flushed. She mentioned moving money overseas, he admitted. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order. Laura shot to her feet, her composure completely shattered. This is ridiculous, she yelled, her voice echoing in the room. I did what I had to do. Mark suffocated me. I needed a way out. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stood, my voice ringing with fury. While your son was fighting for his life, you were scheming to leave him. Don't you dare call that survival. It's selfishness. The judge's gavel silenced us both, but the damage was done. Laura's outburst had revealed more than any document ever could. By the end of the day, the verdict was clear. Full custody of Ryan was granted to me. Laura was ordered to pay restitution and attend counseling before she could have supervised visits. The court also froze her accounts to prevent further financial misconduct. As I left the courtroom, a strange mix of relief and exhaustion washed over me. The battle wasn't entirely over, but I had won the most important part. Ryan would be safe. That evening, back at the hospital, Ryan managed a weak smile as we shared pizza in his room. Will things be okay now, Dad? He asked, his voice faint but hopeful. Yes, buddy, I promised, squeezing his hand. They will be. I'll make sure of it. For the first time in what felt like forever, I believed it. The days following the courtroom battle were a whirlwind. The legal victory had given me full custody of Ryan, but it didn't erase the damage Laura had done. There were still loose ends, unanswered questions, and the haunting knowledge of how close she had come to destroying everything. One evening, after Ryan had fallen asleep, I sat down with the stack of evidence I'd collected. Something didn't sit right. The offshore account was just one piece of the puzzle, and Greg's testimony hinted at plans far more elaborate than even I had uncovered. Laura wasn't just reckless. She was calculated. I opened my laptop and started digging, going deeper into the account transfers. What I found made my blood run cold. The offshore account wasn't just for savings. It was connected to multiple shell companies. Each had been receiving steady deposits over the last year, all originating from Laura. Why would she need shell companies? My mind raced with possibilities, each worse than the last. I clicked through pages of documents, the hours slipping by unnoticed. Then I found the final piece. An encrypted email trail between Laura and someone named K. Howell. The messages were brief but damning. Laura, is the paperwork ready for the move? I need it done by the end of the month. K. Howell, all set. Once the final transfer is made, you'll have everything you need to relocate without complications. Just make sure you're prepared for the fallout. Fallout. The word echoed in my head. This wasn't just an affair or financial misconduct. Laura was plotting to vanish completely, leaving Ryan and me to deal with the aftermath. I forwarded the emails to Peter immediately, along with a note. This isn't over. The next morning, I confronted Laura outside her temporary apartment. She opened the door wearing a smug expression, as if she had already moved past the court ruling. Mark, she said, crossing her arms. To what do I owe the pleasure? I held up a printout of the emails. Her face paled for a split second before she masked it with indifference. Care to explain this? I demanded, my voice sharp. She leaned against the doorframe, her lips curling into a smirk. It's none of your business anymore. You got what you wanted, Ryan. What I do now is my concern, not yours. My fists clenched at my sides. You think you're untouchable? That you can steal from your own son and disappear? You underestimate how far I'm willing to go. Her smirk faltered, just enough to show she wasn't as confident as she pretended. I didn't steal anything. That money was mine to use however I saw fit. For what? A fresh start in another country? Shell companies? An encrypted paper trail? I stepped closer, my voice low and threatening. You're not as clever as you think, Laura. I've already forwarded everything to my lawyer. The court might have been lenient before, but now, you're looking at criminal charges. Her composure cracked. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. Watch me, I replied, turning to leave. You're done running. As I walked away, I felt the weight of the confrontation lift slightly, replaced by a grim determination. Laura's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but she had underestimated my resolve. For Ryan's sake, I would see this through to the end. Back at the hospital, Ryan was awake and smiling faintly when I entered his room. He looked stronger than he had in weeks, his color returning little by little. Dad, he said, his voice soft but steady. Are things really better now? I sat beside him, brushing a hand through his hair. They will be, buddy, I promised. I'm going to make sure of it. As I watched him drift back to sleep, I knew this wasn't just about protecting him from Laura anymore. It was about rebuilding everything she had tried to tear apart and giving Ryan the life he deserved. 2 days later, I received a call from Peter. His tone was tense, almost hurried. Mark, I've reviewed the emails and the account connections you sent me. This goes deeper than we thought. What do you mean? I asked, gripping the phone tightly. Peter sighed. The shell companies Laura funneled money into aren't just generic fronts. They're connected to a known network of offshore financial operations. This isn't just about her trying to escape. It's potentially illegal on an international level. I felt a chill run down my spine. So what happens now? We escalate, Peter said. I've already contacted a forensic accountant to analyze the transactions. Once we have a clearer picture, we'll take it to the authorities. But, Mark, I need you to be ready for the fallout. Laura's not going to go quietly. I hung up and sat in silence, my mind racing. Every step Laura had taken, every selfish decision, seemed to have been part of a grander scheme than I'd initially realized. She wasn't just reckless. She was dangerous. That evening, I decided to pay Greg another visit. I wanted answers, this time about what else Laura might have been hiding. When I arrived at the dealership, he looked even more uneasy than during the court hearing. "What now, Mark?" he asked, his voice shaky. "You tell me," I replied, stepping closer. "You knew about the offshore account. What else are you hiding?" Greg backed away, his eyes darting nervously. "Look, I already told the court everything I know. I'm not getting dragged into this any further." "Dragged into it?" I barked. "You're already in it, Greg. You took money from her, helped her plot to leave. If I go to the authorities, you think they'll care that you're claiming ignorance now?" He swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. She mentioned something once," he stammered, "about needing a safety net for more than just herself. Something about securing things for someone else." "Someone else," I repeated, narrowing my eyes. Greg nodded hesitantly. "I didn't ask questions, okay? I didn't want to know. She just said it was better if I stayed out of it." His words sent alarm bells ringing in my head. Who else could Laura possibly be protecting? Was it Kay? Howell? The mysterious contact from the emails? Or was it someone else entirely? "You're a coward," I spat, turning to leave. "And when this all blows up, don't expect me to shield you from the consequences." As I drove home, my thoughts churned. Greg's vague confession only deepened the mystery. Laura's betrayal wasn't just about leaving. It was about something far more calculated. The next morning, I received an unexpected email from Peter. Attached was a preliminary report from the forensic accountant. The transactions revealed a series of smaller payments that seemed unrelated to Laura's escape plan. One stood out, a monthly transfer to a private clinic in another state. I stared at the name of the clinic, my heart pounding. Why would Laura be sending money there? And for whom? Without waiting for Peter's input, I called the clinic directly. Posing as Laura's husband, I asked for information about the payments. The receptionist hesitated, but after some coaxing, she revealed a name that made my blood run cold. It wasn't Laura. It wasn't Greg. It was someone I hadn't thought of in years. Laura's estranged sister, Claire. Claire had disappeared from our lives years ago after a massive falling out with Laura. She'd always been trouble, but why was Laura sending her money? And what connection did it have to everything else? I hung up, my hands trembling. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they created was far more sinister than I'd imagined. Laura wasn't just betraying me or Ryan. She was hiding secrets that could destroy everything and everyone if they came to light. The name Claire echoed in my mind like a gunshot. I hadn't thought about her in years. Laura had made sure of that. Whenever I brought her up, Laura would shut the conversation down with a cold glare or a sharp remark about keeping toxic people out of our lives. But now, here she was, right in the center of everything Laura had been hiding. I didn't wait to piece things together. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Pulling up the clinic's website, I found their address in Ohio, several hours away. Without hesitation, I grabbed my keys and left. Ryan was stable for now, and the nurses promised to call if anything changed. The drive was tense, my grip on the wheel tight as my mind raced. Why was Laura sending money to Claire? What kind of treatment required such large sums? And how did this fit into the larger picture of her betrayal? When I arrived, the clinic was tucked away in a quiet suburban neighborhood, its modest exterior betraying nothing of the secrets it held inside. I approached the front desk, my stomach knotting as I repeated the lie I'd told over the phone. "I'm Laura Mitchell's husband," I said, forcing a calm tone. "I'm here to check on the financial arrangements for Claire." The receptionist gave me a wary look before typing something into her computer. "One moment," she said, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I tapped my foot impatiently, scanning the room. It was too quiet, the kind of place where secrets were buried under layers of polished professionalism. "Claire isn't here right now," the receptionist finally said. "But I can tell you she's been receiving ongoing care for quite some time." "What kind of care?" I pressed, my voice firm. She hesitated, glancing around nervously. "I'm not at liberty to discuss patient details, sir." I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "I'm not asking as a stranger. I'm her family, and the money we're sending, it's straining everything. I deserve to know what's going on." She seemed to waver, then sighed. She's receiving treatment for substance abuse, she said quietly. It's a private, long-term rehabilitation program. Substance abuse? My stomach churned. Laura had been funneling money into this clinic for months, maybe years, without a word. But why the secrecy? And why now, when Ryan needed every resource we had? Has she mentioned anything about leaving the program soon? I asked. The receptionist shook her head. Not to my knowledge. But her sister is her main contact. You'd need to ask her for more details. I thanked her and left, my mind a storm of questions. On the drive back, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the tip of the iceberg. Laura's connection to Claire wasn't just about money. It was tied to everything else. By the time I reached home, it was dark, and my phone buzzed with a message from Peter. Peter, we need to talk. New evidence came in. I called him immediately, pacing the living room as I waited for him to answer. Mark, Peter said, his voice serious. I just received a report from the forensic accountant. There's another account Laura's been using, one we didn't find before. The transfers are recent and they're large. Much larger than the ones to the clinic. How much are we talking? I asked, my heart pounding. Over $100,000, he said. And it's not going to Claire or Greg. It's going to a law firm in New York. I froze. A law firm? For what? That's what we need to find out, Peter said. But my guess? She's preparing for something big. Maybe custody, maybe an escape plan. But whatever it is, she's not done. My pulse raced as his words sank in. Laura wasn't just scheming in the past. She was actively planning something now. Something bigger than I'd imagined. As I hung up, one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Not even close. Laura was playing a dangerous game, and she wasn't finished making her moves. But neither was I. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, the silence in the house deafening. The weight of everything, the court case, the money, Claire, and now the law firm, pressed heavily on my chest. Laura wasn't just reckless. She was calculating, moving pieces in a game I hadn't even realized I was part of. Peter called while I was still staring blankly at my untouched coffee. His voice was tight, urgent. Mark, we've identified the law firm Laura's been wiring money to, he said. And they specialize in international relocations, Peter continued. Primarily cases involving clients who want to move abroad and legally block custody claims. My grip on the phone tightened. She's planning to run, I said through clenched teeth. It gets worse, Peter added. They're filing motions to contest the custody ruling. She's arguing that you're unfit due to emotional instability caused by the stress of Ryan's illness. I shot up from my chair, my heart pounding. She's using Ryan as leverage? After everything she's done. She's playing dirty, Peter said. But we have the evidence to counter her. The key is to stay ahead of her moves. Hanging up, I felt a familiar fury bubbling in my chest. Laura was throwing everything at me, but I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her take Ryan or twist this nightmare into some fabricated version of reality where she came out on top. That afternoon, I made my next move. If Laura wanted to play games, I'd play smarter. I needed more information, more leverage. I drove back to Greg's dealership unannounced, storming into his office before he could even think to run. Mark, he said, his voice cracking as he stood, his hands raised defensively. I already told you everything I know. Not everything, I interrupted, slamming a stack of documents onto his desk. What do you know about the law firm in New York? Greg's face went pale. He sank into his chair, his hands trembling slightly. I don't know anything about that. Don't lie to me, I snapped, leaning over the desk. Laura doesn't do anything without a reason, and I know you've been helping her. So start talking, or I'll make sure you go down with her. Greg swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room. Look, she mentioned something, he admitted reluctantly. She said if things went south in court, she had a backup plan. But she didn't give me details. She just said the lawyers would take care of everything. And the money? I pressed. She told me it was for securing her future, Greg said. That's all I know, I swear. I stared at him, the anger simmering in my chest. He was spineless, but I believed him. He was just another pawn in Laura's game. A pathetic tool she used and discarded when convenient. As I left the dealership, A thought struck me. If Laura had gone to such lengths to set up this escape plan, she wasn't just running from the consequences of her affair or the custody battle. She was hiding something bigger. That evening, I sat down with Peter to strategize. We laid out everything we had: bank statements, offshore transfers, Greg's testimony, and now the connection to Claire and the law firm. It was a mountain of evidence, but the pieces still didn't fully connect. "Mark," Peter said, his tone cautious, "there's one more thing we need to consider. If Laura's planning to flee, she's likely already taken steps to disappear completely. We need to stop her before she can make her next move." "How?" I asked. "We file an injunction to freeze all her assets, including the funds tied to the law firm," Peter replied. "If she can't access her money, she can't execute her plan." "And what about Claire?" I asked. "She's part of this, whether Laura admits it or not." Peter nodded. "We'll subpoena the clinic's records. If Claire's involved, we'll find out." As the plan came together, I felt a grim sense of determination. Laura thought she could outmaneuver me, but she didn't realize I was already 2 steps ahead. That night, as I sat by Ryan's bedside, I watched his peaceful face, his small hand clutching mine even in his sleep. "I've got you, buddy," I whispered. "No one's taking you away from me." The war wasn't over, but I was ready for whatever came next. Laura had underestimated me for the last time. 2 days later, the court granted the injunction Peter had filed. Laura's accounts were frozen, cutting off her access to the funds she needed to execute her plan. It was a small victory, but I knew it would only provoke her to fight harder. That evening, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, the voice on the other end sent a chill through me. "Mark, we need to talk," Claire said. Her tone was calm but deliberate, each word carrying a weight that immediately put me on edge. I hadn't heard her voice in years, and now, out of nowhere, she was reaching out. "What do you want, Claire?" I asked, my voice sharp. "You think you have it all figured out, don't you?" she replied, a faint hint of mockery in her tone. "But you're only seeing the surface." "Then enlighten me," I shot back. There was a long pause before she finally spoke. "Meet me at Grayson Park tomorrow at noon. Come alone." Before I could reply, the line went dead. The next day, I arrived at the park early, my eyes scanning the area for any sign of her. Claire emerged from the shadows of a large oak tree, her appearance far more composed than I expected. She looked nothing like the troubled woman I remembered from years ago. "What's this about, Claire?" I asked, keeping my distance. She smirked, folding her arms. "I'm surprised Laura didn't tell you herself. But then again, she's always been good at keeping secrets." "Cut to the chase," I said, my patience wearing thin. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Do you know why she's been sending me money?" "For your treatment at the clinic," I replied. Claire let out a bitter laugh. "That's the story she's been feeding you?" "Of course it is. Laura always was the master manipulator." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "She wasn't paying for my treatment," Claire said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She was paying me to keep quiet." My stomach dropped. "About what?" Claire glanced around, as if ensuring no one could hear her. "Laura's been embezzling money for years. Long before Ryan got sick, long before Greg. She used me as her scapegoat, funneling money through accounts in my name. When I threatened to expose her, she bought my silence." The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. "You're lying," I said, though the conviction in my voice wavered. "Am I?" Claire shot back, pulling a flash drive from her pocket. "Everything you need to know is on here. Bank statements, transfer records, even emails where she lays out the whole scheme. She's been planning this for years, Mark. Ryan's illness was just the excuse she needed to accelerate her plans." I took the flash drive, my hands trembling. "Why are you telling me this now?" Claire's expression softened, if only slightly. "Because she doesn't deserve to get away with it. And because you deserve to know the truth." Before I could say anything else, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the park, clutching the drive like it was a live grenade. That night, Peter and I reviewed the files. The evidence was damning. Every transaction, every lie Laura had told, was laid out in black and white. "This changes everything," Peter said, his voice grim. "With this, we can bring criminal charges against her." She won't just lose custody. She'll lose everything. As I stared at the screen, anger and betrayal roiled within me. Laura hadn't just betrayed me as a husband or Ryan as a mother. She had orchestrated a web of lies that reached deeper than I could have imagined. The next steps were clear. It was time to end this once and for all. Laura thought she was untouchable, but her empire of lies was about to come crashing down. The courtroom was packed for the final hearing. The stakes were clear. Laura wasn't just fighting for her reputation. She was fighting for her freedom. The evidence from Claire's flash drive had been submitted, and the prosecutors had worked quickly to build a criminal case against her. It wasn't just about embezzlement. It was about fraud, neglect, and a callous disregard for her own family. As I sat with Peter, watching Laura take the stand, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was anger, yes, but also a deep sadness. The woman I had loved, the mother of my child, had become a stranger. And yet, this moment wasn't about her anymore. It was about Ryan. Laura's attorney tried to spin a narrative of a desperate woman trapped in an unhappy marriage, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The judge's expression grew harder with every piece of damning proof presented. When Greg took the stand again, he delivered the final blow. "She told me," Greg said, his voice trembling, "that the money wasn't just for her. She wanted to make sure no one could find her. Not Mark. Not even Ryan." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Laura sat motionless, her face pale, her mask of indifference finally cracking. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, my hands steady despite the storm of emotions within me. I turned to the judge, then to Laura. "This isn't just about money," I began, my voice clear. "It's not just about betrayal or lies. It's about responsibility. When our son was at his weakest, Laura didn't just abandon him. She stole from him. She stole his security, his future, and his trust. And no child should ever have to suffer because of a parent's selfishness." I took a breath, feeling the weight of my words. "But this isn't about vengeance. It's about making sure Ryan has a chance to heal, to grow, and to feel safe. That's all I want. That's all he deserves." The judge delivered the verdict swiftly. Laura was sentenced to several years in prison for embezzlement and fraud. Her accounts were permanently seized, and the remaining funds were allocated to cover Ryan's medical expenses and ensure his future. She was granted supervised visitation rights, but only after completing mandatory counseling and rehabilitation. As the gavel struck, the room fell silent. Laura didn't look at me as she was escorted out. Her head held low. For the first time, she seemed to realize the weight of what she had lost. That evening, I returned to the hospital. Ryan was awake, his color improving as the treatments began to show results. I sat by his bed, holding his hand as we shared a quiet moment. "Is Mom coming back?" he asked, his voice soft. "Not for a while," I replied honestly, my voice steady. "But you don't have to worry about that. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." He nodded, his small fingers curling around mine. "Okay, Dad." As I watched him drift off to sleep, I thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, the endless nights of doubt and fear. It all led to this moment. I had fought for Ryan, not just to protect him, but to give him a life where he could feel safe and loved. Life has a way of testing us, of stripping away everything we think we know. But sometimes, it's in those moments of loss and pain that we find what truly matters. For me, it was the reminder that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, trust, and the sacrifices we make for those who depend on us. As I left the hospital that night, the air felt lighter, the weight on my chest finally easing. This wasn't just an ending, it was a new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I knew we were going to be okay. Life isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning to weather them and coming out stronger on the other side. That's what I'd tell anyone in my shoes. Fight for what matters, because in the end, it's all worth it.
"Thanks for everything, but I want to get to know my real dad now." That's what the boy said. My boy. 18 years of lunches packed, knees bandaged, midnight rides, parent-teacher nights, asthma meds, football games, and that's how it ended. In a garage that still smelled faintly of the old crib I stored for some godforsaken reason. Dylan didn't look angry. He didn't look guilty. He looked transactional. Like I was a stepping stone he was politely stepping over. He gave me one of those half hugs, shoulders barely touched, arms limp, no weight behind it. Then he turned and walked back into the house like he'd just returned a borrowed wrench. Claire stood in the hallway, arms crossed, her face unreadable. Except it wasn't unreadable. I've seen that look before, on a nurse's face when she's about to deliver bad news and wants to get it over with. I nodded, didn't flinch, didn't blink, just nodded. He didn't even ask how I felt, and Claire didn't say a word. I walked to the edge of the garage and watched him drive off in Gregory's Lexus. Funny, he never liked that brand until last week. I caught a glimpse of Claire in the window, peeking through the blinds like she was waiting for the storm to pass. She didn't know I'd already heard her on the phone 2 months ago, whispering to someone. He was never Harold's. I just couldn't tell him. That whisper had been echoing in my skull ever since, scraping away the walls I'd built. I didn't say a word back then either. Not when I found the phone bill with the late-night calls to Gregory. Not when I saw the photo frame in Dylan's room flipped around, hiding the picture of me and him at the Grand Canyon. Not even when I picked up Dylan's phone to call in his prescription refill and saw his contact for me changed from Dad to Harold. I stood there in the fading afternoon light, dust particles dancing in a beam of sun through the cracked garage door, and I made a decision. Not out of anger, not revenge, just silence. That night, I went to my study, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a white envelope. It had been sitting there for months. Paternity, confidential. I had never opened it. The day I picked it up from the lab, I drove around for hours, then slid it into the drawer and told myself, "You already know, but you're a father, not a biologist." But tonight, something shifted. I didn't open it yet. Not out of fear. I wanted the moment to be right. Clean, sharp, undeniable. I slipped it into the fireproof safe and then opened a fresh page in my old black notebook, the same one I used to track training logs when I ran the firehouse. At the top of the page, I wrote one word, wait. Then I drew a line beneath it. No dates, no names, just the word. Because some things don't need to be rushed. Some truths don't need an audience right away. If you're listening this far, and you're one of the 98% who watch but haven't subscribed, help me hit my first 10,000 subscribers. It motivates the team behind these stories to go even harder. We're building this from scratch, brick by brick. Your support is what keeps it alive. I slept in the guest room that night, not because I was banished there, but because I wanted distance. I needed to hear my own breath again, without Claire's half-truths smothering the air. I stared at the ceiling and thought about Dylan's first Christmas, how he used to hum when he fell asleep, how he once told his second-grade class he wanted to be a firefighter like my dad. Then I closed my eyes and rewrote the memory, because apparently that dad was just a placeholder. And placeholders don't cry. They plan. The silence in the house wasn't peaceful. It was surgical, cold. Every noise, the fridge kicking on, Claire's footsteps upstairs, the hollow sound of the ice settling in my glass, felt like a scalpel tracing along nerves I didn't even know I had left. I sat in my study with the lights low and the old jazz station playing just loud enough to keep the walls from caving in. On the desk sat my phone, screen still lit up with Dylan's contact. I stared at it for a moment. No photo, no custom ringtone, just Dylan. I pressed and held. The prompt appeared, delete contact. I didn't hesitate. Thumb down. Gone. He wouldn't call me if he got in a car accident. He wouldn't call me if he broke his leg. I wasn't Dad anymore. I was just Harold. So why pretend? I opened the side drawer, the one where I kept things I didn't want to see but couldn't throw away. Old service medals, Claire's wedding vows, and that envelope. Still sealed. Still marked in plain black type. Paternity. Confidential. I remembered the day I requested the test, months ago. The lab tech had looked at me like I was asking for a gun permit. I'd smiled, told him it was just for peace of mind. But it wasn't. It was for survival. Because I'd already heard Claire whisper into her phone, "He doesn't even know." I never told him. He's not really his. She said it in the laundry room. Thought I was asleep upstairs. I wasn't. I just laid there in bed with my eyes wide open, letting the ceiling fan click its little metronome of betrayal. I never confronted her. Not once. I watched. I waited. I studied her like smoke in a burning room. How it moves, how it clings, how it warns. I held the envelope now in my hand. It felt heavier than it should. Paper and ink shouldn't carry this kind of weight. I turned it over a few times, like maybe the answer would bleed through the seal if I looked hard enough. Then I stood, crossed the room, and opened the fireproof safe in the wall. I placed the envelope inside, shut the door, and spun the lock. Not yet. I went back to the desk, opened the notebook I hadn't touched since retirement, and wrote one line in block letters. Wait. No context. No timeline. Just that. Because I knew something was coming. I didn't know what form it would take, or when it would land, but it was on its way. I could feel it in my joints, the same way we used to smell a gas leak before a fire ever started. Claire didn't ask where I slept that night. She didn't ask why I didn't speak over breakfast, or why I didn't pour her coffee. She just kept checking her phone like she was waiting for someone else to text first. Probably Gregory. Mr. Real Dad. She'd always had a talent for reshaping history, for rearranging facts until they served her version better. She was never cruel about it, just precise. Like a scalpel, same as the silence. I started making a list in my head. Not a revenge list. A preparation list. Old firemen don't fight blazes with rage. We fight them with containment. If Dylan was Gregory's son, I needed to know what that meant. Legally, financially, emotionally. If he wasn't Gregory's, then we had an entirely different problem. One that would tear Claire's tidy little narrative apart at the seams. And if he wasn't mine or Gregory's, well, that would change everything. Claire made roast lamb. She only makes that dish when she wants to impress someone. I hadn't tasted it since the mayor visited our firehouse 5 years ago. The good china was out too, the stuff that needs to be hand-washed because dishwashers don't respect detail. The table was set for 4. I guess I should have been flattered I still had a plate. Gregory showed up 10 minutes late, cologne hitting the hallway before he even crossed the threshold. He wore one of those blazers that looks casual until you notice the label, then it screams, money without effort. He handed Claire a bottle of wine like he'd practiced it. Some imported nonsense I couldn't pronounce. She giggled, not laughed. Giggled, like a damn teenager. Dylan lit up when Gregory walked in. Full smile, shoulders high, voice louder. That used to be my entrance. I used to be the one he waited up for. Now I was a placeholder in a chair he didn't bother pulling out. Dinner was a performance. Gregory talked about some firm he was consulting for contracts, travel, stock options. I've got connections at UC Davis, he said. Might be able to fast-track some scholarship paperwork if you're serious, Dylan. Wow, really? Dylan said, eyes wide like he just found out Santa was real again. That'd be incredible. Claire leaned in. It's good to have someone with reach, finally. I said nothing. Just cut my lamb and chewed slowly while Gregory talked like he'd been raising the boy all along. Like he hadn't been a ghost for nearly 2 decades and now decided to show up with a wine bottle and some LinkedIn buzzwords. At one point, Gregory even chuckled and said, you know, Harold, raising a teenager's no joke. Thanks for keeping him in one piece. I looked at him, smiled. All credit to genetics, right? He laughed. Claire didn't. After dessert, which Claire baked from scratch, and I hadn't seen her do in years, I started clearing plates. No one offered to help. Dylan and Gregory were too busy laughing about some recruiting trip or golf retreat or whatever. Claire poured more wine. In my own home, I was background noise. A waiter. An afterthought. I brought the last plate into the kitchen, turned on the faucet, and just stood there. Water running. Knuckles white on the rim of the sink. I could hear them behind me talking, toasting, planning. A family, but not mine. Later that night, when the dishes were done and the guests were gone, Claire stood at the doorway of the study. Her arms were crossed, but not in anger. More like she was preparing herself to say something she'd rehearsed. He deserves to know who his father really is, she muttered. No eye contact. I didn't look up from my notebook. Sure, I said. Just let me know when you figure it out. She said nothing. Didn't move. Just lingered a second too long before backing away. That night, I sat alone at the dining table, staring at the place where Dylan had laughed so freely, so easily, with a man who hadn't been there for a single scraped knee or a 2 a.m. fever. And I realized something. I wasn't losing a son. I was watching a house of cards rebuild itself with counterfeit pieces. But I knew the truth. And the truth doesn't need applause. It waits. The lawyer's office smelled like cedar and quiet judgment. I'd known Mitchell Kent since he was a hot-headed public defender with a cheap suit and a coffee addiction. Now he wore tailored wool and had a view of the harbor. Still chewed the inside of his cheek when he was nervous, though. Some habits never die. Others you kill. I need to amend the will, I said, sitting across from him. He raised an eyebrow. Everything all right with your health? I'm not dying, I said. I'm evolving. He chuckled awkwardly, then opened the folder on the desk between us. What are we looking at? Remove Dylan as my healthcare proxy. College fund. Close it. Roll it into a trust for something else. He paused. You sure about that? I nodded. I raised him. I won't ruin him. But I also won't be used like an ATM in a fireman's jacket. Mitchell didn't push back. He'd seen enough betrayal buried under legalese to know when a man wasn't bluffing. What do you want to do with the assets instead? Create a scholarship. Quiet. Private. No photo ops or headlines. Just kids of firefighters who didn't make it home. Give them a shot at college, trade school, whatever helps. Call it the Red Line Fund. He looked up from his notepad, and for a brief second, something softened in his expression. That's a hell of a legacy, Harold. No, I said, staring out the window. It's a correction. The next hour was signatures, forms, dates. I revoked Claire's durable power of attorney while I was at it. Not out of spite. Just clarity. She'd made her choices. She wanted Gregory to be the man of the house. Fine. Let him carry the legal burdens too. Let him pick up the phone when Dylan breaks his leg snowboarding and the hospital asks who's on the insurance. By the time I left the building, the fog had rolled in over the water. Gulls circled like something was dying. I stopped at a diner I used to visit on night shifts. Sat at the corner booth. Ordered black coffee and a slice of cherry pie. No reason. Just habit. The waitress, new girl, couldn't have been older than 20, smiled as she set it down. Rough day? She asked. I looked at the pie. No. Clean one. On the way home, I passed a billboard advertising a family law firm. Protect what matters most. I almost laughed. What matters most is the truth. And the truth doesn't need a lawyer. It just needs time. When I got home, Claire was in the living room folding laundry like we were still playing house. I walked past her. Didn't speak. Didn't stop. She called out after a few seconds. You okay? I paused in the hallway. I'm adjusted. She didn't know what that meant yet. But she would. In the garage, I stood in front of the old fireproof safe, hand resting on the handle. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I walked over to the corner, grabbed my toolbox, and began fixing the loose shelf Dylan had broken years ago with his soccer trophies. I replaced the warped plank, sanded the edges, made it stronger. Funny how sometimes things become sturdier after they've been fractured. 3 weeks after the dinner, the shine started to wear off Gregory. It began with a missed college visit. Dylan had been hyped all week, talking about how Gregory knew someone at admissions, how this would open doors that no guidance counselor could. He even bought a new button-down shirt and cleaned his sneakers with a toothbrush. That morning, he sat on the porch, backpack by his feet, waiting. Gregory never showed. No call. No text. Just silence. Dylan sat there for an hour. Then 2. Claire tried to play it off. Maybe something urgent came up. But Dylan didn't move. Just stared at the driveway like it had betrayed him personally. 3 days later, it happened again. A campus tour Gregory promised to attend. We'll grab dinner after. Maybe meet the department head. But this time, Dylan didn't even dress up. He waited 20 minutes, then walked back inside, past me, without a word. Claire cornered him in the hallway, said something about scheduling mix-ups and grown-up responsibilities. I didn't comment. Didn't need to. The silence between Dylan and his hero was growing louder by the day. That Sunday, as I sat at the breakfast table reading the paper, a small envelope arrived. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a thank you card. From Marcus Hastings. Kid I'd mentored years ago during one of those high school ride-along programs we ran at the station. Dear Mr. Dunn, it read. I just got hired by Sacramento FD. First shift starts Monday. I still remember everything you taught me, especially your rule. Don't be the loudest voice in the room. Be the one they look to when the sirens start. You were that guy for me. I just wanted you to know. You changed my life. I stared at the card for a long time. Claire was making eggs in the kitchen. She glanced over casual, but not. Who's it from? Someone who meant it when he said thank you, I said without looking up. She stopped stirring for a beat, then went back to her pan, more aggressively this time. I folded the card, slid it into the inside cover of my notebook, and took a sip of coffee. Dylan came down later, hoodie pulled low, dragging his feet. He poured cereal, didn't say a word to either of us. Claire offered, "Your dad, Gregory, called late last night. He was tied up at a conference." Dylan didn't even flinch, just stared at his cereal like he was trying to figure out if milk had an expiration date on trust. It was starting, not a blow-up, not the kind of betrayal that slaps you across the face. No, this was erosion, slow, quiet, and relentless. He was learning his first real lesson, that biology doesn't show up when it matters. That DNA doesn't cheer in the rain or drive 4 hours to watch you sit on the bench. That a father isn't just a man who shares your blood. He's the one who stays. But Dylan had made his choice. And I wasn't in the business of chasing boys who handed me their backs. Claire, though? She was beginning to sweat. Not visibly. Not yet. But I saw it, in how she lingered in doorways, how her tone shifted from confident to cautious. She knew Gregory wasn't reliable. She just never thought Dylan would notice so fast. And me? I had nothing left to prove. I was no longer the fallback. I was the absence they would have to explain. It came in a thick, cream-colored envelope, the kind you don't get unless someone wants something or wants to hurt you legally. Claire opened it in the kitchen, hands trembling just enough to betray the performance she was about to stage. I watched from the hallway, unnoticed, as she skimmed through it. Her lips moved as she read, like she couldn't believe the words even as her eyes confirmed them. I stepped in just as she reached the last page. She flinched like I'd caught her holding a murder weapon. She tried for casual. It's just from a lawyer. Gregory's. I said nothing. Her eyes darted. It's about establishing paternity formally. He wants his name on the birth certificate. Still nothing from me. She added, like tossing a wet match into a gas leak. And he's suing for back child support. There it was. The real bomb. Not paternity. Not pride. Money. I poured myself a cup of coffee, let the silence stretch, then finally spoke without looking at her. Let him try. She blinked. What? I turned, met her eyes. Let him try. There was a pause, a thick, hollow one, and then she scrambled. You knew, she said quickly. You always suspected. You didn't say anything because it didn't matter, right? I mean, what does a test prove, after all this time? You raised him. It was amazing how fast she reached for revisionism, like flipping through a Rolodex of lies and trying to find the one that still fit. My lawyer says if you contest, it could get messy, she continued. I was now scanning for a weak spot in my reaction. For Dylan. He doesn't need this kind of conflict in his life right now. I took a sip of coffee. You're right. He needs stability. Integrity. An example. Claire scoffed, like that was a personal attack. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was just the truth getting a little less polite. She placed the letter on the counter and crossed her arms. Gregory has every right. Gregory has rights he abandoned 18 years ago, I cut in. Rights don't accrue interest just because the guilt finally showed up. She paused too long. Then came the classic pivot. You're being vindictive. No, I said, calmly, flatly. I'm being still. And stillness only bothers people who've been spinning their lies too fast to notice the cracks. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. Claire sat down hard on the stool, the paper still trembling in her fingers. I watched her then, really watched her. The way her shoulders hunched just slightly forward, her gaze fixed on a knot in the countertop, the tip of her thumbnail tapping against the table in uneven rhythm. The lie was catching up to her. Not just because Gregory was trying to turn parenthood into a financial negotiation, but because she'd built this whole house on the myth that I knew and chose to stay silent out of nobility. But now that myth was fraying, because I wasn't reacting how she expected. She thought I'd explode, or plead, or at least ask why. Instead, I was watching her drown in her own calm. Dylan came home that night, distracted, muttering something about a quiz. Claire tried to act normal, but her smile was too wide, her voice a half octave too high. He noticed. He just didn't ask. Not yet. But soon he would. And when he did, I wouldn't have to answer. The truth would. The envelope was pale yellow and stamped with Superior Court of California in bold, bureaucratic ink. It arrived on a Tuesday, wedged between a Home Depot flyer and a dental appointment reminder. Subtle. Ordinary. Like betrayal dressed as junk mail. I opened it at the kitchen table while Claire was in the garden, pretending to care about Rosemary. Subpoena. Civil hearing. Gregory Carlton versus Harold Dunn. The claim? Intentional deprivation of paternal rights, emotional damages, and financial restitution. I actually laughed. Not loudly. Just that short, bitter exhale that tastes like metal. He wasn't just claiming to be the father. He was claiming I had robbed him of the role, like I was the one who ghosted 18 birthdays, 10 Halloweens, for school dances, and a dozen ER visits. Like I'd somehow faked fatherhood out from under his nose while he was too busy living a consequence-free life. Claire came back inside mid-laugh. She spotted the envelope immediately. Her eyes locked on it like a weapon she forgot she'd loaded. Is that what I think it is? No, I said, folding it neatly. It's a wedding invitation. You and Greg are on the cake. She didn't rise to the sarcasm. Her hands trembled as she reached for a chair. He's serious? She asked, almost whispering. Looks like. Claire dropped into the seat like her legs gave up. This wasn't supposed to go this far. He said he just wanted recognition. No, Claire. You wanted recognition for him. He just wants money. She stared at me like I'd just turned into a stranger. Maybe I had. Or maybe I'd stopped being the accommodating ghost she could walk through without resistance. You can't let this go to court, she said quickly, breath short now. Think about Dylan. Think about how this will look. He doesn't need to see this play out like some courtroom drama. No, I said, walking over to the study. He needs to see the difference between a man who shows up and a man who shows receipts. She followed me down the hallway. Please, Harold, don't escalate this. I opened the drawer, pulled out the white envelope, the same one that had been sitting there for months, unopened, labeled paternity, confidential. I held it in my hand, turned to her, and handed it over gently, like I was placing a scalpel in a surgeon's palm. You escalated it long ago. She froze, didn't reach for it. You remember the phone call, don't you? I continued, softly. The one you made from the laundry room, telling Gregory he should come back because Harold has no idea Dylan's not his? The one I wasn't supposed to hear? She didn't deny it, didn't breathe, just looked at the envelope like it had started ticking. I never opened it, I said, because I didn't need it. Until now. What are you going to do? Her voice cracked around the edges. I didn't answer, because the answer didn't belong to her anymore. This wasn't about pride or revenge. It wasn't even about Dylan, not entirely. It was about truth, delivered clean, silent, and undeniable. The kind of truth you can't lawyer your way out of. The court date was 3 weeks away. Plenty of time for everyone to panic. Me? I'd already made peace. Now it was time for them to make war with their own reflection. Courtrooms have a strange smell, like dust, paper, and restraint. The kind of place where truths don't erupt, they seep. People sat straight-backed in wooden pews, pretending they weren't eavesdropping. But everyone listens in family court. There's no shame in that building, just spectators, all waiting for someone else's life to crack. Gregory sat smug, flanked by his lawyer, some kid with too much gel and a folder thick enough to choke a copier. Dylan sat near the back, Claire at his side, hands knotted white in her lap. Her mouth moved constantly, whispers, explanations, denials, whatever spell she was spinning to hold her son's loyalty a few more minutes. The judge was a woman in her 50s. Calm eyes. No patience for theatrics. She skimmed the file in front of her, cleared her throat, and said, Mr. Carlton, your petition requests formal paternity establishment, financial restitution for 18 years of child support, and joint legal recognition. Do you have documentation to support biological connection? Gregory's lawyer stood. Yes, Your Honor. Based on testimony, Mr. Carlton is the biological father and I didn't wait for him to finish. Your Honor, I said, reaching into my briefcase. I have the DNA test. There was a moment, a breath held too long. Claire turned sharply. Her eyes shot to mine, pure panic. You can't submit that, she snapped, voice higher than she probably intended. He never. The judge raised a hand like a metronome stopping time. You may speak when addressed, Mrs. Dunn. I stepped forward. This was taken months ago. Sealed since then. Chain of custody verified. It will clarify the question of paternity for all parties. I placed the envelope on the bench. White. Unopened. labeled paternity, confidential. The judge looked at me. "Mr. Dunn, are you sure you want this entered into record?" I nodded once. The courtroom seemed to lean forward as she sliced the seal with a silver letter opener. She pulled out the single page, I scanning line by line. Claire's lips mouthed something. Maybe a prayer. Maybe a curse. The judge's eyebrows lifted just slightly, an inch of surprise that felt like a scream. She adjusted her glasses, cleared her throat. "According to this report," she said slowly, "Gregory Carlton is not the biological father." Silence cracked the air like lightning. Gregory leaned forward. "Excuse me." The judge continued, voice steady, merciless. "Furthermore, the tested party, Harold Dunn, is also excluded. The test confirms a non-match between both claimants and the minor, Dylan Dunn." A sound escaped Claire's throat, half gasp, half choke. Dylan turned his head toward her so fast it was almost comedic. "What?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Gregory stood up, stunned. "There's no way. There's been a mistake." But the judge was already sliding the file toward the clerk. "The results are clear and certified. If either party wishes to contest, they may file a motion. But this hearing, as written, is resolved." Dylan stood too now, pale as chalk. "Mom." Claire reached for him. "Baby, there was a time, just once, it didn't matter, Harold was. He is your dad." But Dylan had already stepped back. Her hand froze midair. The room was spinning, and no one moved. Because the lie wasn't just broken. It was shattered, sharp and public, with everyone bleeding from it. The judge nodded to me. "Mr. Dunn, is there anything you'd like to add?" I looked at Dylan, at the boy who once held my hand across the street, at the ghost of a son I had built a life around. Then I looked at Claire. She couldn't even meet my eyes. "No," I said. Nothing more to say. And I meant it. Claire looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her, and she was still trying to pretend gravity didn't exist. Her mouth opened, closed. No sound. The courtroom had gone quiet, except for the soft rustle of papers and the occasional creak of old wood as someone shifted in their seat, trying to pretend they weren't watching lives implode. Dylan just stood there, blinking like the air had turned toxic. His gaze went from Gregory, now sitting, stunned and pale, to Claire, whose face had turned into a mask of desperate recalibration. And then, finally, to me. I held his gaze, not with anger, not with sadness, just finality. Then I stood. I nodded once to the judge. "Thank you for your time." No outburst. No tearful goodbye. Just civility in its most surgical form. As I walked toward the rear exit, I pulled a plain envelope from my coat and placed it gently on the bench beside Dylan. It was unsealed. No dramatic wax stamp. No frills. Just his name, in my handwriting. He looked down at it, confused. Claire reached for it, of course she did, but he moved faster, snatching it from the bench like it might vanish. He didn't open it right away. Just clutched it with both hands, still frozen in place as I walked past the rows of stunned faces. And I didn't look back. The letter read, "Dylan, I chose you. That's the part they'll never understand. I didn't stay because I had to. I stayed because I believed in you. You were never an obligation. You were never a mistake. You were my son, and I was proud of you every time you tried harder than the world expected. But when you turned away, when you walked out with a stranger and looked at me like a stranger in return, you didn't just make a choice. You closed a door. And I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. But I won't knock on a door that was shut in my face. Life will teach you more than I ever could now. About loyalty. About silence. About who shows up when nothing's easy anymore. Just remember something. A test didn't undo my love, but it did reveal the weight of yours. I'm not gone. I'm just done. Harold." By the time Dylan opened it, I was probably already halfway down the courthouse steps. I like to imagine he read it in silence. That for once, Claire didn't say a word. That Gregory, suddenly demoted from real dad to statistical error, just sat there swallowing the bitter medicine of being exposed not just as absent, but irrelevant. Inside that room, everything collapsed. But outside, I was already walking forward. I had nothing left to hold, and no reason to stay where love had been treated like a rental agreement. And from that day on, if my name came up in their conversations, I imagine it came with a pause. Not regret. Just the echo of someone they thought would stay and didn't. The old bench outside Engine 42 still creaked the same way it had when Dylan was 6, and used to sit there with a juice box, watching his dad, hose down the trucks after a call. He sat there again now, taller, older, paper in hand, but looking more lost than he ever had as a child. The letter was creased from too much reading, faded at the edges. It had become something of a phantom limb, something he reached for even when he didn't realize it. The bay doors were open. Inside, a new crew shuffled around, laughing, swapping shift stories. A younger man leaned against the same fire engine Harold used to captain. Dylan didn't recognize a single face. That was fitting, because the man who raised him, the one who used to come home smelling like smoke and black coffee, who taught him how to throw a spiral, how to sharpen a blade, how to keep your mouth shut until the smoke clears, wasn't part of this new chapter. Harold hadn't come back. After the court day, he vanished. Not in the theatrical sense. No burning rubber. No drama. Just absence. His phone went to voicemail. His social media, what little there was, hadn't been touched. Claire had called every mutual friend. Nothing. Like trying to dial into a frequency no longer broadcasting. He hadn't even come back for his own retirement plaque. But Dylan eventually found out where he went. The house, the home Harold had spent 2 decades shaping, patching, and defending, was no longer in their name. Title search showed it now belonged to the Red Line Foundation, a quiet nonprofit providing housing and education grants for children of firefighters killed in the line of duty. Dylan had driven past the house once, just to be sure. It was being remodeled. Kids played in the yard. Laughter echoed off the siding Harold had once painted himself. The garden Claire had ignored was now a memorial, small brass plates naming fallen heroes embedded into the stone path. He didn't ring the doorbell, just sat in his car for 20 minutes, letter in hand. Claire lived alone now. Gregory had disappeared the moment the DNA results were unsealed. His pride couldn't survive the hit, and neither could his fake commitments. Dylan barely returned her calls anymore. Not out of vengeance, just inertia. Some distances aren't worth closing. At night, she still left Harold's chair untouched, still paused before deleting voicemails, still insisted, to anyone who would listen, that she never meant for it to go this far. But no one was listening. Dylan sometimes replayed the last few months like a bad dream he had to translate for himself. Gregory had shown up with charm and promises, and left when the truth asked him for proof. Claire had bet on a narrative that crumbled the second someone demanded receipts. And Harold? Harold didn't scream, didn't throw a single plate. He simply peeled off the title of father and handed it back, not with rage, but with precision. That was the part Dylan couldn't shake. He didn't lose Harold to a fight. He lost him to truth. There was no reconciliation letter, no surprise reunion, just that final sentence in Harold's note. I'm not gone. I'm just done. Dylan folded the letter again, placed it back in his pocket, and looked toward the firehouse. One of the new recruits stepped out, nodded politely. You knew Chief Dunn? He asked. Dylan hesitated, then nodded once. Yeah, he said. I knew the man better than I deserved to. The recruit smiled, didn't press, and went back inside. The bench creaked again as Dylan stood. Legacy doesn't always leave a statue. Sometimes it leaves silence, and a story no one dares rewrite.